Hello world, in this video I'm going to show how you can live code instruments and audio effects in Ableton Live using Facet. So here I have a little Facet command prepared and I'm going to walk through what it's doing and then just kind of keep expanding from there. So here it is. Here's how you generate a Facet pattern. You first start with a $sign and you give it a name, my notes, it could be anything here. Then run some methods. These are all in the documentation, you can look them up. First it's generating 4 samples of noise, then it's scaling those numbers to be between 50 and 70. Then let's simplify this. Let's just say for now, we don't even need a chord. It's just 4 values that are between 50 and 70, and then they get mapped into the key of C major. So MIDI notes that are in C major. Add a semicolon here and transmit it. Now, the first argument to note is the velocity, so let's change that to very soft. It defaults to 100. Now it's very quiet. Let's make it louder. Let's make it a pattern, so you can send in Facet patterns to a bunch of the arguments in Facet. And so when you do another pattern inside of the broader outermost pattern, which needs to start with a $sign, you can use the underscore kind of shorthand. And if you wanted to, you could also, just to be pedantic, you could do this. It means the same thing. Let's say we want the velocity to ramp from 10 to 127 over 4. So it should get louder each note over the course of the loop. And we can look at velocity here and see that that's happening. Okay, the second argument to note is the duration. Let's make it 2000. It defaults to 125, which is 125 milliseconds, so this would be 2 seconds. So longer notes. Okay, so let's go back and add that chord in again. And to start, we'll just say all of them M11 chords. So yeah, you could kind of hear some harsh, longer durations there. Like if you look at the number of voices in this sampler, there's 32 available voices, and each of these is running for 2 seconds. So all of the voices can be active at the same time. It can be very, very like loud, annoying chords at that point. But like that's the fun part of MIDI, is that and the fun part of synthesis and live coding is you can explore the edges and the corners of stuff. So I reduced it down from 2 seconds to 500 milliseconds just to help make it a little less obnoxious sounding. Anyway, the third argument is just the MIDI channel. That can be any value from 1 to 16. And I believe it can also be an array, so you could supply like multiple channels and transmit the same MIDI notes to different channels. Let's just say 1 for now. Then the last argument into note is a pattern that represents the position. By default, it just spreads the numbers out over the course of the whole loop. So if I say, let's remove the chord and make it just, I don't know, 16 notes in the key of C that are spread out over the course of the loop, and reduce the duration down to 125 again. Let's just hear how that sounds. It's just more notes, basically. Okay, now if I instead want to, also let's just like change this so that it has less of a slow attack. It's kind of hard to hear what's going on. And then I change the position, I can make it a pattern, and to say, let's make it ramp from 0 to 0.5 in 16. So in other words, like redistribute the notes so that they start at the beginning and they end at the midpoint. So all 16 notes are going to happen by the midpoint. Easier to hear when you change the release so it's easier to hear. Cool. Okay, now maybe again, just to make it a little easier to hear, let's just put the velocity back to 60. Okay, now another thing you can do, because this is somewhat limited, like you're stuck within this one loop, right? You can say over. The over method means that it distributes the numbers that you've generated and processed over a certain number of loops. So this means that the 16 values that are scaled between 50 and 60, and they're in the key of C, they'll actually be played over 4 loops. And that means that with this particular position argument as well, that means that for the first 2 loops, right, from the 0 to the midpoint, which would be the second loop, there will be notes. And the second 2 will be empty. Depending where this starts, it might take a second. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. The first loop will be empty, this loop will be empty, and then it should start back up again. Okay, so yeah, that is, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with that, because then you can spread the notes out like in a pretty non-symmetrical way, right? So let's say we have 128 notes now that are spread over, I don't know, this might sound crazy because it's larger range up to higher frequencies, but over 4, but then instead we smush them into the first 1/3, and then it's silent for the remaining 2/3. There you go. Now we should have the rest of it be silent, and then after this loop it'll start again. Yeah, so lots you can do with kind of just positioning and dispersing the notes how you want. You can change velocity, you can change duration, and that's a really quick primer on notes in real time with Facet. Another thing you can do is save the MIDI notes that you've generated as MIDI files. So let's also make this, we can get rid of over here and just make it like chord M11, key C, and then save MIDI. So this method saves a MIDI file to your computer. I'm just going to add once so that it just does it once. Run that and then look at, in my Finder, this is what, it's 10:14 right now. This is the MIDI file that was just generated. If we look at it, we see that it is M11 chords and 128 of them. Let's listen to it in the synth. So maybe I'm just straight up going with no plan here, so bear with me. Cool. Yeah, the idea with Save MIDI is that you can take the MIDI data that you've generated and turn it into something that you can use elsewhere, or it actually even has more time precision, right? It's like dead accurate on the exact time divisions that you might want, so that's super useful. And then just to maybe run through the arguments in Save MIDI, the first one is the file name, so I just typically you could either do date.now, which is just the timestamp. It's the file name, makes it easy to know. There's also a shorthand in Facet, TS, which just means timestamp. It does the same thing without having to type date.now. Then there's a velocity pattern, so you can supply a pattern instead. If you look at all of these, they just have a default velocity. It's kind of confusing. It says 64, but then it ends up being a little bit higher than that. This is a limitation of the Node.js package I'm using to write MIDI files. Basically, these values should be between 0 and end up needing to be between 0 and 100 here. And then that gets mapped from the lowest to the quietest. So don't look at the document. Do look at the documentation. Don't worry about it too much. Let's just apply a pattern like ramp from 20 to 100 over 32. Duplicate 3 times. That should be equal to the 128 notes in the file, just so we can see it. Then duration pattern. This is the kind of like the note length. Let's just keep it at the default for now. Wraps is something I'll talk about in a second. And tick mode, let's just not worry about for right now. So we run this, and underscore is not defined. Made a little error there. It can't be like that. It has to be new facet pattern dot ramp. So run that again. No errors. Here's the new file. Drop it in, and you can see that the velocity is ramping up from 20 to 100, even though the number is a little bit different. So let's just listen to that. Yeah, so I mean, just to kind of be clear, like a lot of this stuff, I'm just kind of showing how things work right now. Like the fun part about Facet is iterating and generating something and then being like, maybe if I change this, it'll make it sound better. So like, I'm not going to go deep on a particular idea right now. I'm just kind of quickly sketching my thoughts. So, yeah, don't hate on my work, please. Just trying to show the stuff you can do. Okay, so then that's save MIDI with dynamic velocity. The next one is the duration. So you can also supply a dynamic duration. So let's, for that, like ramp from 64, or I guess let's not start with that. Let's just run with a single number first. So this defaults to 16, change it to 64. Run that, and it should just mean that the file is shorter because it's generating the file right to be 64th notes instead of 16th notes. You can see that this file is just a lot faster, just like shorter time divisions. What's really interesting is that you can supply a pattern here and have that note division change over time. So if we start at 64 and go to 8 over, I don't know, 32, and then duplicate that 3 times, we also need to make sure that the numbers are mapped onto the values that are valid. So I know that like these are valid time divisions. Basically, if we give this numbers that are not good time divisions, the MIDI file won't generate. So I'm just saying ramp from 64 to 8 over 32 values, duplicate that 3 times, and then make sure every single number in the pattern is one of these, like whichever one it's closest to. It's only going to end up with numbers like that. Okay, let's run that again. And we got a new file. Let's drop this one in, and you can see that the time values are like stretching out, right? So let's listen to this one. So it's starting to get some more interesting. Let's plop it onto this drum track too. Cool. Okay, that's a good quick primer on MIDI, note generation, how you can transmit stuff in real time, and how you can save MIDI files. Just some other fun, quick things before I move on to MIDI CC. I have a Max for Live device that I've made that's called Prob Skipper. It's like just free, and you can get it for free in Gumroad somewhere. Just look for it, you can find it. Here it is, and it's really helpful, like especially with these MIDI files, like you can generate them and then control the probability of note distribution. So if I put this down to 50%, and then let's just find like a little loop in here, right? Whoops. Well, I guess yeah, let's do this. And just select like this loop. So at 100% probability, it's just going to be the same MIDI data looping over and over. It sounds very robotic. Right? If we change it down to skip 50% of the notes, it starts to give it more of a groove. And if we go down even further, then it's like just, less notes, even harder to discern the like kind of pattern that's underlying everything. And I mention this just because there's also ways to do this inside of Facet. So let's just get rid of this and go back to something like this. And then say, so what I was going to say is that the prob method, if you use this, you can essentially set a probability of the numbers in your pattern to 0. So a probability of 0.5 would mean that 50% of the numbers are now set to 0 in this pattern. But one thing to keep in mind is that Facet will actually send a note at MIDI note 0. So you actually want to replace all instances of 0 with -1 or any negative number. And that will mean that Facet will just skip those altogether. So if we run this, you'll hear that, this is probably too many notes, I'll put it down to 32. You'll hear that some of the notes are being skipped. And if I move this down to like 0.1, then 90% of the notes are being skipped. So it should just be a few per. There you go. I was like, is it coming? Yeah. So yeah, just another, I think, interesting way to come up with interesting combinations of stuff. And of course, I'm not getting into the many methods you can do, like palindrome. And say I do first like a ramp from 50 to 70 over 8, and then do a palindrome. Then I can get rid of scale. And now we have sort of like a ramp that goes up and back down. Of course, we should remove prob now to hear the palindrome. Yeah, so, okay, that's MIDI notes. There's a lot you can do. Have fun with it. The second thing that I wanted to show is the workflow for how you can transmit MIDI control change messages. So that's how you can automate different parameters in Ableton Live. You know, like for example, you want to automate this note skip percentage or any of the parameters in any Max for Live device. You can do that with MIDI control change and create MIDI mappings, and that's what we're going to do right now. So I have like a little bit of commands prepared. So I'm just going to paste them in here and walk through them a little bit. So this one is MIDI CC 70. And I'm going to run that. It's a sine wave with 3 periods that's then scaled between 0 and 1. And expo means that kind of the values tend towards 0 more than they tend towards 1. So it's kind of like exponentially scaled back towards the lower end of this range. And the size of there's 500 numbers total. And it's transmitting on MIDI control change channel 70. So I run this, and you can see I've already made the mapping to this particular parameter in Ableton Live, but if you needed to, what you would do is you would stop everything in Facet. I do control period and control comma. That just stops all commands and stops all regeneration, so you see it quickly just do it like habitually. Once you see that there's nothing being transmitted, then you would pick the parameter you want to automate in Live, then press Command M to go into MIDI mapping mode. You can see it's already mapped onto MIDI channel 70, but I'm going to delete that so I can show you what you would do. So now nothing's mapped onto it. You click the parameter, and then you go back to Facet, start running the command that you want to attach to it, and now you can see it's attached to MIDI note 70. Then you can stop the Facet command, you can stop the MIDI mapping, and the mapping now exists. Whenever you're ready to, you can run it and it will start working. You could replicate this with any of the other parameters that I've already kind of prepared here, but the point is just to kind of more quickly show that you can then automate a whole bunch of different parameters using this approach. And so I've got like the pitch shift parameter of this pitch shifter also automated with control change channel 71, and I've got the feedback for the pitch shifter also automated through this one on channel 73. And I guess for right now, let's see how that sounds. If I go find like the MIDI data here and just loop it and run. Cool. So you can see that I added a third parameter, which was connected to the BPM in Live, or a fourth parameter, but whatever. Like basically, you know, since the BPM of Live is also automatable, I created a mapping through this to ramp from 0, aka the lowest value, which would be 20 BPM, up to 1, which is the highest value, 999 BPM. And so that was kind of why it was like moving slow, fast through the MIDI information. So yeah, just different, all sorts of fun, interesting things you can do to automate behavior in live. And I think maybe the question one might ask is like, well, why would you do this? Like, you could just use Max for Live devices to automate. And that is true, you can. I do that all the time. I think the thing that Facet that I really enjoy about it is that you have a flexibility to really completely change things on the fly without needing to disconnect anything. And that's what's so fun about live coding, is that you can generate and process and modify the data however much you want, and as long as it's connected to where it's going, it's going to keep allowing you to improvise without having to sort of get stuck in the low-level details of how to reconnect something, how to add something to your system, right? Like there's a whole bunch of depth to what you can explore with this stuff, and very quickly move into different domains and explore different zones. So that's what I think is so fun about this stuff, and I think that's pretty much it for right now. Thanks for watching. Bye.